back there, Colin? How's that? A little better now? Yes. Good?
Pretty good now.
Before I get started, I just wanted to give a little parental warning. I think most of the kids have already gone off to Sunday school. It doesn't look like there's any left, but I suggested to Kathy that maybe they should give that anyways. There are going to be a couple of pictures in the slide deck that you're going to see here that for some younger people could be potentially upsetting. So I just wanted to give you a heads up on that one. So I want to start by putting you into a hypothetical situation. Imagine for a moment that you are a young Jewish man living in a concentration camp in Poland. And one day, a group of soldiers assembles you together into a work detail. And you're sent off to a hospital nearby, off-site from the camp, where you're required to do some work. While you're there, a nurse comes up and taps you on the shoulder and asks you if you're Jewish. You say yes. You're taken to the bedside of a dying Nazi SS soldier. He's been injured badly, wrapped in bandages, and he knows that he's on his deathbed. And he wants to confess his sins to a Jew. He wants to clear his conscience before he goes to his grave. And he tells you about some of the unspeakable things that he's done. One of them in particular is especially upsetting. Tells you about a situation when he was working with a group of German soldiers, and they were in the Ukraine, and they had pushed the Soviet troops back. The Soviet troops, as they were retreating, left landmines, and it killed a significant number of the German soldiers. So in retribution, these Nazis gather up the remaining Jews that are there in this town. They put them into a house, they douse it in gasoline, they light it on fire. Those who don't burn to death inside are shot as they're trying to escape by a group of soldiers who are standing around laughing as they're doing it. Next slide, please. This is the subject of an actual book. Can you go back one? This is the subject of an actual book called The Sunflower. It was written by Simon Wiesenthal, and this is something that actually happened to this author. It was a book that was suggested reading for us before we went on our Compassion to Action mission to Austria, Poland, and Israel, and it was sent to us by the Friends of the Simon Wiesenthal Center for Holocaust Studies. And these are the people who would be our hosts as we went on our trip. Next slide, please. So who was Simon Wiesenthal? Well, he was a Jewish Austrian who was basically enjoying a rather peaceful life. He just finished school as an architect and was about to launch his career as an architect when the Nazi machine began rolling through Europe. He survived that Nazi concentration camp. Rather than going into architecture after the war was over, he devoted the rest of his life to capturing Nazi war criminals. His work led to the successful capture and prosecution of more than 1,100 Nazi war criminals. So the Friends of Simon Wiesenthal Center is devoted to preserving the memory of the Holocaust, and it was this organization that sent us on our mission. So our first stop was Vienna, which some of you may have been to before, an absolutely beautiful city, but unfortunately has a rather horrible past when it comes to the Holocaust. There were 165,000 Jews living in Austria in 1938. Today there's less than 10,000. 65,000 Viennese Jews alone were murdered in the Holocaust. One of our first stops was sorry, can you go back one? So one of our first stops was the Vienna Stadttemple. Now, this is the only Jewish synagogue to survive the Nazi pogrom of 1938. Absolutely a beautiful, beautiful building inside there. We met with a tour guide and the rabbi who ministers there. It's one of the only ones to survive. There were 19 other synagogues in Vienna prior to 1938. They were all burned down. Now, the Nazis, you have to remember, were very methodical about what they did and very systematic. prior to burning these places down, they went in and they captured all the lists of the people who were members of those synagogues. It was those lists that they would use to round up all of the Jews that would eventually be detained and sent to concentration camps. So try to imagine just for a moment that happening here. Imagine somebody coming into Glenwood and burning it down, going to Jane and taking all of our membership lists and using those lists to round people up. That's what happened to these people. We had the opportunity to visit the Simon Wiesenthal office in Vienna where he conducted all of his work, and you can still see all of these boxes of files on some of the war criminals that he captured and prosecuted. One of the ones that really stuck out to me, and you'll see this, I don't know if you can see that well enough, but these are 4 boxes of files, 4 boxes alone devoted just to Dr. Joseph Mengele. And if you've not heard of Mengele, he was responsible for some of the worst atrocities ever committed to mankind. He was, of course, the physician at Auschwitz. He was notorious for his selection of prisoners, sending them off to the gas chambers, and conducting horrible human experiments on people. Unfortunately, Mengele was never caught. He was one of the few who managed to escape. He made it to South America. In 1979, he died swimming off the coast of Brazil. One of the highlights of the trip, we were actually treated to lunch at a place called the Imperial Hotel in downtown Vienna. Hitler, of course, was Austrian. And when the Nazi machine occupied Austria, this was a hotel downtown where Hitler and a lot of his top generals actually conducted the war effort. They met in this place, had lunch, ate there regularly, dinner, and this is where they planned all of their strategy sessions. Simon Wiesenthal, before he died in 2005, held his 90th birthday in this hotel. It was his one last chance to let them know that the final solution didn't work. Next, please. This is the Holocaust Memorial in Vienna. You might not be able to tell so well from the picture, but this is a concrete structure that's built to actually resemble a library. And if you look closely, you'll see that there's a book that's supposed to represent each one of the 65,000 Viennese Jews that were murdered during the Holocaust. And if you look at that picture in the foreground, what you'll see is that those books are turned to face outward, with the pages facing outside, rather than a traditional library where you'd see the titles of the books and the spines facing outward. The point is that of that construction is to symbolize that these are stories that will never be told for each one of these people. Next, we went to Krakow in Poland, which again, like Vienna, is an absolutely beautiful city, but again has a horrible, horrible past when it comes to the Holocaust. There were more than 3 million Jews in Poland at the beginning of the war. Today, there are less than 10,000. Staggering. This is the main entrance at Auschwitz. We've had the opportunity to visit Auschwitz and Birkenau, which of course were some of the worst concentration camps and part of the Nazi machine. It's now a museum, which is devoted to ensuring that the memory of the Holocaust will never be forgotten. This used to be a Polish army barrack that was converted when the Nazis occupied Poland. The inscription that you see over the gate there, and forgive my German, it reads, Arbeit macht frei, or work makes you free. Between these two camps, there are an estimated 1.1 million Jews who were systematically murdered. One of the most profound things that I learned when I was there was just how methodical the Nazis were about exterminating these people. The lengths that they went to in order to deceive them. When people came in, there were string quartets positioned just inside the gate, playing music to give you a sense of calm. When people went to the showers, they were stripped naked and handed a ticket. And they were told, you're going to need this ticket to get your clothes back. They never got their clothes back. This was one of the most difficult parts of the museum for me. Like I said, they never got their clothes back. These are stacks of shoes that you can see that belong to those people. Their luggage, the things that they brought with them when they were rounded up and brought to this place. These were real people with real lives, just like you and me. There were mothers, fathers, children, housewives, doctors, lawyers, laborers. They had possessions, they had luggage, they had toys. All of the stuff is there in this museum for you to see. And all of these people were rounded up simply because one group didn't like their beliefs, they didn't like their values, didn't like their way of life. There were, of course, survivors, and this is one of them. This gentleman's name is Max Eisen. He's 86 years old, and he joined us on our mission. He was a teenage boy when his entire family was rounded up in Moldova and brought to Auschwitz, and he was the only one who made it out. He spent 14 months there. And this is a picture of him standing in front of the very barracks where he lived. Just down the road from that barracks was the hospital. Max worked there anywhere from 14 to 16 hours a day, cleaning medical instruments, clearing up bloody sheets. Being able to walk around Auschwitz with him, listen to his experience and ask him questions was one of the most profound things that I ever experienced in my life. We saw the showers, saw the ovens. These aren't figments of people's imagination. They are real things. And it was undoubtedly one of the darkest places that I've ever been in my life. When we traveled to Jerusalem, one of the guides that we were with said that we were going from a place of great darkness, to a place of great light. And that's really what Jerusalem is for the Jews. That's what Israel is for the Jews. It's a place of great hope and optimism. But you can't really speak about the Holocaust without speaking about the modern state of Israel, and vice versa. You can't really speak about Israel without fully understanding the Holocaust, which is why we went to both of these places. So I took this photo standing on the top of Mount Scopus, overlooking the walls of the old city of Jerusalem. And we drank a toast to the modern state of Israel, which, of course, in many ways was born out of the Holocaust. Well, that and 3,000 years of oppression and statelessness, occupation by everyone from the Byzantines and the Persians and the Crusaders right up to the Ottomans and the British. Next, please. You have to understand that Israel is a precarious state that is living under the constant threat of annihilation. We had a chance to visit the Knesset, which of course is the Israeli parliament, where David Ben-Gurion read the Declaration of Independence in May of 1948. The next day they were attacked by 5 armies. That threat is constant, and it hasn't gone away to this very day. One of the most profound things that I saw was when I stood on top of a hilltop in southern Israel in a little town called Sderot. It's a town of about 24,000 people. And if you look at these pictures, the one in the foreground, it's difficult to see, but that's the Gaza Strip. It's about 800 meters away from this town. That section right up on the top of that picture is called the Neighborhood of Martyrs. So I stood looking at that, and behind me over my left shoulder was the actual town. There's about 24,000 people there. We had a chance to meet with the mayor of this town, and he told us what life was like, their daily existence. Told us about how rockets are lobbed out of the Gaza Strip into his neighborhood at a rate of about 1 or 2 a week. A picture in the background that you can see are stacks and stacks of the rockets that are lobbed into his town. When we stood there on the top of that hill, just a week prior to that, a rocket landed and hit a playground in his town. That picture that you see in the front is a bus shelter. Do you know what else it is? It's a bomb shelter. When the sirens go, you've got 15 seconds to get inside of one of them. Our tour guide pulled up in front of the place, said, "All right, everybody, you got 15 seconds." We had to get up off the bus and run into it just to know what it was like, just to experience what that was like. 15 seconds to get into one of these things. They have higher rates of heart attacks in this town, higher rates of miscarriage, bedwetting among their children, higher rates of post-traumatic stress disorder. This is their day-to-day existence. This is what they live with. While we were in Jerusalem, we also got to see the Holocaust History Museum, which is also called Yad Vashem. It's a must-see if you ever get there. And I don't know if you probably can't see this, but I'm wearing my Yad Vashem pin today. It's a piece of barbed wire, which of course symbolizes the Holocaust, but there's leaves growing out the end of it, which are supposed to represent the hope and the optimism that Israel is for the Jewish people. It's a constant reminder of the Holocaust, but it's also a constant reminder of the anti-Semitism that led to the Holocaust. And it's a reminder of the anti-Semitism that still exists to this day. And it's a monument to the hope that another building like this will never have to be built again. Which brings me back to something that Simon Wiesenthal said before he died. The history of man is the history of crimes, and history can repeat. So information is a defense. Through this we must build a defense against repetition. But as a species, what have we really done from preventing it from happening again? What about modern genocides? What's happened since the conclusion of the Holocaust? Has history repeated itself? Well, if you look at the stats, it's hard to say that it hasn't. Cambodia, Nigeria, Rwanda, Darfur, Bosnia, Burundi. And those numbers are on the low side. Those are estimates, conservative estimates on the low side. Was there anything that could have been done to prevent these things from happening? Did we try? And it also begs the question, how did we respond to the Holocaust? What did we do? In the late 1930s and early 40s, there were thousands of Jews who were trying to escape Europe. President Roosevelt called something called the Evian Conference in 1938. It was attended by 32 countries, and they were trying to address the Jewish exodus. It was at this conference that an Australian delegate was famously quoted as saying, "We don't have a racial problem, and we don't want to import one." There are even those in Canada who argue that we did very little to do anything about the Holocaust. I'll draw your attention to a story about a ship called the MS St. Louis. It was an ocean liner that set sail from Germany in 1938-39. Had about 900 European Jews on it that were trying to escape the Holocaust. They tried to get into Canada, tried to get into Cuba, and they tried to get into the US, and they were denied entry in every one of those countries. And they went back to Europe. And what do you think happened to them there? Early in 1945, an unidentified Canadian immigration agent was asked how many Jews would be allowed into Canada after the war. His reply was, "None is too many." Any of this sounding familiar? Sound like anything that's happening going on today as we sit here? There's thousands of Syrian refugees who are trying to escape murderous extremists. So it's happening right now. And then there's this. This is a picture that shattered millions of hearts. It was published in thousands of newspapers around the world. Millions of people woke up that morning and looked at their newspapers and said, how does this happen? There's two really simple answers: extremism and an international failure to respond to a humanitarian crisis. This is a little boy who was trying to escape extremism in Syria. Could have just as easily been a little boy who was trying to escape Nazi fascism in 1938. So how did they do it? Well, the Nazis knew the value of propaganda, and Hitler knew that a key method of convincing people to buy into his twisted ideals was to reach young people. In 1923, the youth organization of the Nazis had a little over 1,000 members. By 1938, there were 7.7 million. Much of the increase was due to forcible takeovers of other youth organizations. And in fact, a 1934 law declared that Hitler Youth was the only legally recognized youth organization in Germany. In March of 1939, all German youth were inscripted into the Hitler Youth, even if the parents objected. And those parents who refused were told that they were going to have their children taken away. Young people being conditioned into extremism. Does that sound like anything that's happening today? I'm going to get Karen just to flip through this next group of slides. These are just some headlines that show how ISIS is going about recruiting young people around the world, including here in this country, getting them to go to Syria and do the kinds of things that they're doing. Stop there. So what are we going to do? Back to this question about those Syrian refugees who are trying to escape extremism. Justin Trudeau, of course, as we know, has promised that he's going to make good on his campaign promise and allow 25,000 people into Canada. Some of those organizations are undoubtedly going to come, or some of those people are actually going to come to Windsor, and there's organizations that are gearing up to accept them. What can we do to help? What can Glenwood do as a church community to try and help these people? Because it's not going to be easy. You hear it all the time. They're different than us. They wear different clothes, speak differently, they eat different food. When I was working at the university, our president, Alan Wildeman, he had an expression that he often used. He said, "We create worlds with our words." Create worlds with our words. It's a really simple statement, but it's also really profound. Hitler knew that, and he knew that with his words, he created a world where Jews became less than human. ISIS is doing the same thing right now. So what kind of world do we want? What kind of words are we going to use to describe it? We could start with this one. If we're looking to create a world that we want, let's start with this, where Muslims and Jews and Christians can happily coexist in the same place. It sounds simple on the surface, but acceptance can be really difficult. How many times have you heard it? You've had conversations with people where they've said they come here and they want to change us. They want to change the society that we live in. Maybe they come here because they want to practice their faith in a synagogue or a temple or a mosque just like we do, without the fear of being tortured, persecuted. Maybe they've heard that Canada is the place where you can do that. Maybe this is the promised land. And what can we do as people of faith? Well, we can pray for peace, but we can also pray for the wisdom to spot those kind of hateful ideas that lead to the Holocaust, that lead to modern genocide. The propaganda that masquerades itself as truth. We can pray for the courage to speak out against them. So back to Wiesenthal's dilemma. Could you forgive that dying Nazi SS soldier after he told you what he did? What if you met a dying ISIS terrorist who told you about some unspeakably horrible things that he had done? Could you forgive him? It's right there in the prayer that we say every Sunday. We just said it this morning. Forgive us our trespasses, as we forgive those who trespass against us. But what does that forgiveness mean, and how far does it go? How far are we willing to take it? I want to leave you with one final thought. I mentioned the Holocaust Museum. On the day that we were there, they're walking through, and it's an amazing place. You zigzag through all these different exhibits, and it was crowded that day, and I was stopped in one particular area, and I happened to look up on the wall and noticed an inscription there, and it was a poem. And it was written by somebody named Martin Niemöller, who was a Lutheran pastor back around the time of the Holocaust. This is what it said. "They came for the communists, and I did not object, for I was not a communist. They came for the socialists, and I did not object, for I was not a socialist. They came for the Jews, and I did not object, for I was not a Jew. When they came for me, there was no one left to object." Thank you very much for your time this morning.